trillions could flow through cryptos like Stellar XLM. And you and I, your award-winning Zion Coins founder, Stellar XLM developer, could benefit. And it is all about the fundamentals. But what is it about the fundamentals that gives strength to the technicals? What philosophy, what theories do we need to think about that weighs in on the price, that actually is responsible for everything, in theory? Well, people, we need to think about causal determinism. Causal determinism, if you're not aware of what it is a mathematical understanding of how things play out. What comes next? You could also look at Fibonacci, the Fibonacci system, a sequence of numbers, often starting deriving from 0, then 1, then 2, and so on and so forth. We could say that we can understand how our faces are developed with this Fibonacci code or this Fibonacci system, how the sunflower sequence works, or a shell of a snail, even the universe. This helps us understand, or puts into context, what causal determinism is. How do we know the moon is going to revolve around the earth and the earth is going to revolve around the sun? At what particular point in time in the future will it be doing that? This is based on mathematics, causal determinism. We have to look at things on a quantum scale to understand any different, because that is actually when things start acting differently. Macro or micro, not macro. But understanding causal determinism, to some degree, you'd need a degree in physics, because it's actually a theory where a chap named Laplace's demon has given strength or weight to. And he actually got his ideas from Isaac Newton. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? And so, when we think about causal determinism, we have to think about, well, we can actually mathematically predict what's going to happen next. And that is true to some degree, right? We can mathematically predict what's going to happen next, because it's all about cause and effect, causal determinism, causality. If you run the tap to run a bath, you could be sure that the bath is going to fill, whether it's half full or not, by the by. But a sequence of events can unfold during that time, right? Like, let's say, for example, you have a sinkhole down the road from you and you've got no water, so you can't no longer run the bath anymore. Is that going to happen? It's highly unlikely. Cause and effect. You can't run the bath anymore. But even let's say you did run the bath, you could turn the bath off and you've got a full bath, not a bath half full, right? But do you know if that tap is going to consistently drip then after that? And on that note, a dripping tap can be quite chaotic. And that's where we need to understand about another theory, the chaos theory. Now, to understand the chaos theory suggests that causal determinism doesn't work. It doesn't fit. Because if anything, if that was the system for everything, then we could predict to the T exactly what each and every one of us is going to do consistently. And this is where quantum physics comes into play, because when we reduce things down to a quantum level, chaos theory no longer works. Going back to the dripping tap, the tap starts to drip, it actually has no rhythm to it. It won't drip precisely, consistently all the time, making exactly the same noise. It will never do that. And this is because of quantum mechanics. When we shrink down to the quantum level, we can see that actually things don't operate the same way. Let's take the muon, for example, on a quantum level. It lives, it's heavier than an electron. It lives for 100 million milliseconds. And then turns into an electron and a neutrino. And on that note, we look at the electron. The electron is not predictable. Cannot predict what state it's going to be in from one state to the next. It simply appears in a cloud of cosmic smoke and disappears and reappears as a form of plasmic energy. We cannot predict that. No more than you can predict where a light particle will choose to go, where it's given two paths. And understanding that is to understand compatibilism, because this is where the two merge. Causal determinism and chaos theory. The two together gives light to free will, compatibilism. We as human beings think, therefore we are, right? We're able to make our own decisions. René Descartes. I think, therefore I am. I have free will. I choose to drive in this lane, or I choose to drive in that lane. I choose to do this video. It's only until that free will's been taken away by one society to the next, your choices are limited. But in your mind, you know what you'd like to be doing. This, I believe, this compatibilism, something that chaotic that's happened in the crypto market, is forming right now. And the markets are working itself out to come to a conclusion. Whether that is to increase in value or decrease in value. Cause and effect. Chaos settled by compatibilism. Which way are the markets to go? And with that is to understand why the technicals are important. Because we need to determine which way the market is going to go to be able to benefit from it. be able to make the right calls. If you want to make massive wealth, you need to be a master of the universe. You need to understand these theories to some degree. Lest you don't need a degree for it, you just need to understand it and how to apply it. It's best to be in early, to realize what you have, what you hold. Because if you don't, then you may lose out on massive gains in the future. And these theories are what most technical analysts go by, whether they realize it or not. We've seen Bitcoin play out to a T on a macro level what it's meant to be doing with these Bitcoin halvenings, with the state of the economy, with quantitative easing, with the markets. But for some reason now, it's not behaving the same way. We haven't had the same bear market. We've seen Bitcoin reach new all-time highs in what's meant to be a bear market. Causal determinism is out of the window. Fibonacci system is out of the window. This is more chaotic. So what happened? This, people, is almost like a reset. We now have these ETFs that have launched, and it's spurred this capital coming in to Bitcoin, and it's thrown it out of kilt. So it's no longer deterministic, it's more chaotic. But what happens as time goes along? What happens? Well, when the two merge, causal determinism and the chaos theory, we have compatibilism. This is when the markets reach an understanding of what's happened, cause and effect, the chaos the ETFs have had, and we come to this compatibilism. It's understanding. And I put it to you now, it's a bit like meteorology, predicting the weather. You cannot predict the weather precisely. You can only really say what's likely to happen. And oftentimes, 70% of the times, the meteorologists get it right. Well, that applies to the crypto markets. Okay, and really, to be quite frank and honest, you know, the reason why I got into Bitcoin in the first place was because cause and effect. We had the credit crunch. We had, during 2007, 2010, high inflation. It was crazy. Okay? And then banks stopped lending to each other. And this was called the LIBOR rate, or London Interbank Offered Rates, which is now known as SOFR, Secured Overnight Rate Funding rates. And ultimately, the banks would just not lend to each other anymore over here in the UK. So if the banks aren't lending to each other, nobody's getting any credit. that simple. Nobody's getting any credit. People can't get mortgages. But during that time, house prices were crazily high anyway. You know, and for me, this affected my business massively because I was working with the general public. That's it. You know, I had 3 or 5 guys working with me in my heating company, and the phone just stopped ringing. So cause and effect. Okay, so this hit small and medium-sized businesses massively. Even though we had credit, but that credit line was cut, and as a result, my property went into negative equity, and I had to go bankrupt, and my whole world fell apart. I split with my partner at the time, and I was out there on my own in a little flat, and without a family. But we got through it. I got through it, and you know, when I looked at things and I realized this is not right, and during this time, Bitcoin had came about, and it was precisely because of this reason. And what is the reason? The reason is quantitative easing. Quantitative easing, cause and effect. What's happening now today? Rate cuts. Not even 25 basis points, 50 basis points. People, when you hear things like overnight rates, Fed fund rates, SOFR, LIBOR, this is what's going on. Interbank lending. And as a result, as an effect of quantitative easing, in order to reduce these rates, you have to reduce the 10-year yield. And what does that mean? It means that the Fed are getting in there buying up the premiums, or in our case over here in the UK, the gilts. Gilts, notice that word, gilt, guilty. Guilty because you know what you're about to do. Buying all of those gilts up, yeah? Buying all of the premium bonds. And if you buy up the bonds, basically you're inflating the price of bonds. Inflating the price of bonds means that you're going to reduce the 10-year yield. You're going to reduce yield rates, ultimately. And this has a knock-on effect for the property market, the housing market, because ultimately, mortgage companies base their rates on the 10-year yield. Okay? So lower rates bring stimulus. And stimulus brings higher property prices, higher house prices. But this is supposed to stimulate the real economy because borrowing from big bank costs less. Yeah? But the result, the irony is, it causes inflation. You know, we're talking about inflation. What's the result? How does inflation come about? The Fed prints more and more dollars. This is the irony. The Fed has to print more and more dollars to buy up these bonds. But the result is inflation, higher property prices, higher petrol prices, oil prices, commodities go up in value. Gold, oil, silver, all goes up in value. But this long term affects small and medium sized businesses. It's a vicious cycle. We're now seeing, because of this Fed fund rate cut, we're now seeing widespread increase in prices. We're now seeing expansion in the markets, where all markets are picking up, every market. And this is a good positive sign. Petrol prices, diesel prices, oil prices were decreasing over here in the UK prior. But that's because front running was happening. People were predicting what the Fed was going to do because they know it's reactive, because the employment figures are fudged. Of course they are. Of course they are. You look at the CPI data is on the way up. That spells one thing: slash costs, because people aren't buying. Okay, and prices get too high and there's not enough liquidity in the real economy. People stop buying. They only buy the essentials. That's how it works. In any case, I believe what's happening with Bitcoin is compatibilism. And I think, yes, Bitcoin will see new all-time highs, but I think altcoins will get the better run. I think I'm getting it now. We could put the universe to rights, right? My Zionistas. Well, let's see how this plays out. We've got the rate cut. The presidential election could be happening. Is it going to be the Bitcoin president or Kamala Harris? Either way, cryptos can't fail. I think I'm getting it now. So, I'm going to kick back, listen to that of which is on my playlist still. Listen to some D'Angelo, some translucent brown sugar. I'm Nathan, aka Nathan of Zion. Have a great day.